How's it going, guys and geeks? Welcome back to the Geek Critique Show. My name is Dakota, and I apologize, Jen isn't here with us today, but we do have a special guest, a longtime friend of the show, and he's actually been featured on some of our videos, if you have been following the Geek Critique Book Club, especially our Name of the Wind reviews. Alexander Sigsworth, sometimes known as Siggy Stardust, depending on your circles. How you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good. In a surprising twist of events, it is raining in England.
That's never happened before, not to my understanding anyway. Actually, it did rain a little bit when I was in London, so that was very strange. So we're going to be talking today about Chris Chibnall, the next showrunner for Doctor Who, and what we can expect to see from him. And a few weeks ago, Alex actually emailed me his research that he's done. He collected a few articles, he collected a few quotes from interviews and such from Chibnall's inner team, as well as from Mark Gatiss, and he has some pretty intriguing ideas as far as what we can expect from the 11 series and onward. So, Alex, why don't you take it from here? What's the first thing that you think we should know coming into season 11?
Well, the first thing being that there was the Radio Times article, Doctor Who considering US-style writer's room under Chris Chibnall, which was him reportedly considering using the proper writer's room style for writing Doctor Who, which hasn't been done in Britain before. It's not really the done thing. Generally, British TV tends to be either one person writing it or one person just giving synopses and premises to other writers and then editing it themselves, kind of like the classic series in that sense. Whereas, according to this article, now he's thinking of bringing in lots of writers at the same time to plot out the whole season and episodes collectively, and then work on it all together, which isn't how the Writers Guild of Great Britain works, but they've said they're going to try and make it happen if that's what he's looking for. This is something I've been saying needs to happen for a long time. In fact, I remember in your article, in your blog post, How to Fix Doctor Who, I was saying in comments that they should do it like this. So now to hear him say that he might be doing that, that's quite reassuring to me, because best television is written like that, particularly with things like, they started with The Sopranos and then launched into a whole bunch of stuff with like the so-called golden age of TV. That Doctor Who really needs to catch up with that. People also think that that's how it's written anyway, just because it resembles the kind of high concept American TV, but it's not, but it needs to be.
You actually quoted an article that I wrote years ago. I didn't even remember it when he brought it up to me the first time. I had to look in and see what I wrote and what he wrote back to me. So that's pretty funny that you remembered that. But yeah, I do agree. I think it's about time Doctor Who at least tried that approach, the writer's room approach. I think it works as it does. I'm not saying Doctor Who is broken in it by any means. It's a great show still. And this series has proven that there are some really good stories to be had, even from the current lineup of writers that they have going on. But I am looking forward to the writer's room aspect of the show. And correct me if I'm wrong, did Chibnall do the writer's room thing with Broadchurch?
He did, but it was just him.
Oh, so he's the only writer in the writer's room for Broadchurch.
Well, he did plotted it out with cue cards on a wall and stuff, which is presumably what he'll be doing.
Actually, we have a Mark Gatiss interview that I'll put in the video right here that he actually discusses. He may not be writing in the future of Doctor Who because he really doesn't know what's going on, but he also mentions that he's got a whole team of writers that he's bringing into it, so I think that's pretty interesting.
Obviously, Stephen, who you've worked with for many years, is leaving this year, and Chris Chibnall's taking over. Do you hope to still keep writing episodes?
I hope so. I have no idea. It's a funny thing. It's kind of, it's the end of an era, and obviously working very closely with Stephen, I kind of feel it more than when Russell left. I suppose there was more of a sense of continuity then, but I have no idea. I don't know. I think Chris has got an entirely new writing team. I don't know. I really don't know I don't think anyone knows any details, which is kind of exciting.
You also quoted a report from the BBC that they are planning for the next 5 years of Doctor Who. And this is important. This is Doctor Who getting the green light for at least another 5 years. Now, how did you find that article? What's that all about? Tell us a little bit.
Well, this comes from Radio Times, who are saying that they've got a new distribution deal in Asia, where already they've got the contracts through for Series 12, Series 11, then 12, then 13, 14, and 15. So Radio Times are thinking behind that, okay, so they're already intending to go that far with it. And that presumably that's at least the minimum number of seasons we can expect this Chris Chibnall to be doing. There's that thing that James Strong said, who is a writer but tends to mainly direct and has worked with him on a number of things, saying that it is a 5-year plan. That was his quote, although that was in the Royal Television Society interview.
Yeah, he has, you have it written down here. It's a 5-year project. It's an absolutely wonderful result for Doctor Who. That's interesting, because you kind of got the idea from when Moffat started that he had maybe a 2 or 3 series arc going on, and then he kept adding to it over time and reincorporating characters like River Song and such. So this would be interesting if we had a plan going forward at least 5 years, or at most rather 5 years. I think that could turn out pretty strong for Doctor Who. I don't know exactly how that will plan out, but surely this couldn't all be one story. Do you think that with this writer's room idea, they would stop the individual storied episodes, or would that just be more well incorporated with the overall arc?
Well, I think firstly that Stephen Moffat's initial idea was that the whole of the 11th Doctor's life was sort of the aftermath of a war he was going to be in at the end of his life, affecting him before it happened. So that would essentially be leading up to Matt Smith's regeneration. The problem being that there was no way of knowing exactly how long he was going to stay. And for a long time, he was thinking, I'm at least going to do 2014 and then think about it from there. But then he decided in 2013 that he was going to go, which is why the Time of the Doctor feels like quite a lot of story content just contracted into 60 minutes.
Time of the Doctor really bothers me.
I think in terms of this, this is not something that they would have done before, so they would at least have to sort of pilot it as a concept, which means I think the first season will probably be self-contained within itself, and then anything after that to just add on to it. Kind of like doing a film and then doing sequels. Like how franchises will sometimes say, yeah, we've got these 5 films lined up, here are all the Easter eggs and the references to those next 5 films and this first one, except then that isn't quite as successful as they want it to be, and then it sort of all drops off. That's the risk here. So I think this is probably, and Chris Chibnall sounds like a professional kind of person, because you look at Broadchurch, that first season definitely is self-contained. It's only really the second season that adds on to it. I think that's probably how it'll work.
Now, how do you like the Chibnall written Doctor Who episodes? I have a list of them here. We have 42, which was in the 3rd series of the reboot. We have The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. We have the 5-episode Pond Life mini series, which I thought was actually pretty funny. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, a lot of hype, not much follow through. One of my least favorite episodes in New Who is The Power of 3. Just a terrible resolution. But he also wrote a little thing called PS, which was, that was like a short, I think it was 4 minutes. It wasn't even filmed or anything. I think it was a letter from Rory to his father.
It was storyboarded and then done as an animatic on the website.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to check that one out. That one's actually really touching. I wish they would have filmed that, because it really would have been a great little short that they would have put on the DVD. But anyway, so we know when Moffat came onto the series that he had a strong lineup of episodes that he had already written for Russell T Davies, and probably the strongest of Russell T Davies era, I think, were Stephen Moffat episodes. Now, we kind of have the opposite here, where a lot of episodes written by Chris Chibnall don't necessarily even stack up with the greats of Stephen Moffat's era of Doctor Who. How do you feel about that, and how do you think that will change with his direction, Chibnall's direction?
to take the first part of that question about what I think of the episodes as being written, as a fan or as a viewer?
Let's start with as a fan.
Not good.
Okay, as a viewer.
Not good.
All right, so let's move on to the second part of that question. How can he make it work?
I think often really good storytellers, sometimes the weakness is actually telling the story. People like to use George Lucas as an example of this. All the ideas on paper are really good, but just in execution, maybe he's not the right person for it. I think if he is going to plan on using a team of writers working together, then he should be the leader of that team, but a good leader utilizes their strength. So maybe not to necessarily get too involved with it, maybe to say this is the direction we're taking it in, this is the main events that happened. But if he plans on bringing in his own writers, presumably he'll be the main person selecting them based on their own skill. So perhaps it'll be the case of, I'm actually not going to be too involved, I'm just going to plot out the story and I'm just going to lead where we're going. But when it actually comes to writing the script for the episode, I might edit them and I'll probably be making them work with each other. But there's no assumption to be made here that he would necessarily have as much control over it as Russell and Stephen did, I think. And all I can do is speculate about this stuff. So
Right, and that's all anyone can do at this point.
Yeah.
You do have some really good points that you brought out, especially with the 5-year plan and what we can expect from a 5-year plan. Obviously, we don't know anything story-wise, per se, but we do have a little bit of speculation.
Well, I hesitate to call it speculation because it was just something that I heard on Gallifrey base, so it's probably not that reliable.
I thought this was going to come from Gallifrey base.
Yeah.
I used to frequent Gallifrey base. It's probably, I would say, it's probably the strongest collection of Doctor Who fandom in form
Worse.
on the web. Anyway,
Yeah.
I haven't frequented Gallifrey base in a few years, but let's talk a little bit about that. What exactly did you hear from Gallifrey base?
Well, if we're really going to talk about it, and I don't even necessarily believe this. This sounds like the kind of thing where someone comes up with an idea, believes it, likes their own idea so much, they want it to happen. So they just think, maybe if they tell other people that it's going to happen, that will be their little bit of validation. Getting that out of the way, someone was mentioning, something to do with like Series 11 being about the Time Lords fighting the Great Vampires from State of Decay.
Yes. Speaking of State of Decay, I recently, because of that comment that you made, I ended up getting the E-Space trilogy on DVD. I haven't even opened up the plastic yet. State of Decay is the second story in that. I plan to watch those with Jen. That's actually the first time I'll have ever seen any of those stories. So that'll be fun, and we can do little Who reviews for that. But I'm really looking forward to it. So tell us a little bit about what the Great Vampires are and the war that they had with the Time Lords.
Well, the Great Vampires are part of the first technologically advanced civilizations in the universe, when the universe was much smaller, and the Great Vampires were at war with the Time Lords, led by Rassilon, and Rassilon beat them and ousted them, except that even though the official history says that Rassilon invented or developed regeneration, there are certain things like the Black Scrolls of Rassilon that accuse him of having actually stolen from the Great Vampires, so that he sort of plagiarized their evolution to the Time Lord, and that was where it comes from. So any story about it, not necessarily in Series 11, but just any story about that tries to develop the mythology of it, could go into that.
From my limited research of the Great Vampires and the King Vampire, as he's featured in State of Decay, he was the beginning of the myth, the beginning of the legend that would eventually become the idea of vampires in all these different civilizations. Is that correct, including Earth?
Yeah. Generally, there's this thing in the Doctor Who universe where most mythology is based on aliens. I mean, well, I mean, not just the Doctor Who universe, but like there's a whole thing of, if you notice in the classic series, Gallifreyan text was often ancient Greek. The implication there being that somehow ancient Greek derived from some sort of Time Lord presence on Earth. It's like Omega, for instance, or like Theta Sigma, that sort of thing. And then the whole thing of Ulysses and other things that all come from the expanded universe, which is essentially when a writer just sort of hypothesizes or adds something that isn't necessarily definite. But I like the ideas it's based by the expanded universe, even if I don't necessarily consider it to be real Doctor Who.
I guess this next part is pure speculation, pure wish fulfillment. Like, what would you like to see from Doctor Who moving forward? What do you think Chibnall's strong points are, and what kind of monsters or villains would you like to see return, or anything that you want to see? Let me know.
Did you watch the thing that I recommended? The open air segment on the Terror of the Vervoid DVD?
Oh, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. I do have it, actually.
So you've not seen the infamous clip on that DVD?
I probably have. If I did, it was years ago. Yeah.
The sort of young Chris Chibnall
Oh,
appearing.
no.
Oh, right, okay. Because in 1986, Open Air, it was this BBC programme where viewers and audiences can interview or question producers and writers and makers of television. And one time, it was after the Trial of a Time Lord had aired, and Pip and Jane Baker were on it. And it was in Liverpool. It used to tour the country, and this one time it was in Liverpool, and the Liverpool branch of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society were the audience. And in that audience was Chris Chibnall. And he was there saying to Pip and Jane Baker that Terror of the Vervoid was basically a whodunit on a space liner. You know what else is a whodunit on a space liner? 42. He said it was very cliched, very samey, very generic Doctor Who. Not unlike, for instance, the Silurian two-parter, or Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, or The Power of Three. I think, in terms of what he's good at, I haven't seen a lot of his episodes in a while, so I might be misremembering them, and it's possible that because of the internet I either don't have as high opinion of them as I would do, or that I might have too high an opinion of them, but I think really all he needs to do is, if this writer's room system works, and if it's executed correctly for the purpose that it's intended, we shouldn't need to worry about him too much. Because in a lot of shows, there are showrunners and executive producers and writers that often, generally, most of the shows that use this system tend to be consistently good. Like Breaking Bad, for instance. I've gone through those seasons, and generally it stays the thing that it is, and each episode holds up on its own. So in terms of that, I think all they have to do is just use that system, and if they do it well, then each of their own faults will be minimalized, and each of their own strengths will be raised, because they'd be able to support each other on some things, and then they'd also be able to support each other on other things. So it's like a rising tide that raises them all. I guess, anyway. That would be what I hope of it. But in terms of, like, what I want to see, I do, of course, have my own little plots and things that I have written down. And ideally, if you're talking about what I want to see, well, just sort of come to me and take my ideas and do that, because I think that some of those are pretty good, but that would just be fan fiction. I think generally every fan thinks that they could do it better, but I'm not the kind of fan that cares about specific things. All I really want, the thing that appeals to me about the show, is just that it's a framing device that Doctor Who is like a sort of container for story, and the story can be whatever you want it to be. The actual thing that's been in the container can be whatever you want it to be, so long as it fits the shape. As long as he doesn't try to change what the shape is, he can fill it with anything he likes, and that's fine with me. So that was a very long, convoluted answer, and I sort of rambled a bit there.
No, but I see what you're saying. I agree with you, especially when it comes to the writer's room aspect and like how everyone raises themselves up as a whole by bouncing ideas off one another, what works, what doesn't work. And I think to give Chris Chibnall a little bit of the credit that he probably deserves in his scripts, I think a lot of what he wrote down was scrapped for the sake of time. I also think a lot of stuff is lost in the editing room, especially if, or even it could deal with the actual cost of the stories and how the directors feel it could look better, and that could affect the way a writer's work turns out in the long run. For instance, the Neil Gaiman story, Nightmare in Silver, was notoriously rewritten and rewritten until it was nothing like the original script.
Yeah.
And everyone looked forward to that story because it was supposed to be the return of the scariness of the Cybermen, and it just became a gimmick. But hopefully, with Chibnall, we get a whole new... I want a whole new mood for the series. I don't want it to feel so fantastical anymore. I don't want it to feel like that anymore. So I'm hoping that he brings a certain level of realness to the series, a certain level of character depth that we haven't seen since perhaps Russell T Davies, or even something more akin to that. That's what I hope for anyway. I think the idea of the Great Vampire and the Time Lords War, I think that's a really cool idea to spin off that. But yeah, 5 years. Chris Chibnall is potentially on here for the next 5 years, and hopefully that means really good Doctor Who. Anyway, Alex, any parting remarks for the audience?
For instance, I've had this idea for a long time that maybe it could just be an ensemble drama taking place across lots of different times and places that the Doctor is in, but it not necessarily being about him. That would be a big controversial idea with some people who think it should be all about him. But what if you took established characters from the Doctor Who universe and sort of had them all involved in one overarching plot, and that they slowly converge? Like, you look at the first season of Heroes, for instance, they don't all meet up until the last episode, but they've all got their own little things going on. So maybe you could have, like, half of an episode is just the Doctor going on an adventure, but the second half of it, like the other 50%, is the Master working on something and planning something and trying to set something up, and that you keep cutting back between them across the season until eventually they all converge, because then there's that feeling of payoff. TV is about payoff.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. And I think that could easily be executed. I guess we'll have to see. We'll know more details after the next Doctor is announced, perhaps. We'll start to see more of Chibnall in interviews. Oh, you have something for me?
I was thinking about how they do the 13th Doctor. Did you watch that Q&A?
The live Q&A from the other day?
Yes.
I haven't, no.
Because Stephen Moffat said on Saturday that at the time of it being live streamed, the Doctor Falls hadn't been completed. Now, why do we think that might be?
It's possible he might be revealed in next week's episode.
Precisely. The BBC know that they want to keep it secret. They know that they probably won't, but they're probably still going to try. Like that's why Peter Capaldi's reveal was live, because last time they did it, it was pre-recorded, and apparently someone in the subtitling department leaked it out. So then they tried doing it live, but it still leaked out somehow. So they thought, okay, maybe, what if we do the regeneration at the beginning to establish that that's how this story ends? Then we cut back to the beginning of it, so that then the story comes full circle leading into that regeneration, so that people are expecting it. But what if we don't actually film the end of the regeneration until the week that the final episode is going out? So that for all we know, like the 13th Doctor might be filming that segment this week, maybe early this week, maybe later this week, for them to just put it in there at the end quickly before the final episode has to be completed in its finished cut.
That would be risky timing. I'll give them that if they can manage it.
Planet of the Dead wasn't finished until the day before it was broadcast.
And that's also very risky, being it's the first episode aired in HD too. So wow. Anyway,
Yeah.
Alex, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your for the email that you gave me and the wisdom that you're sharing on the show. So great to have you, especially as I feel like I've known you for years. But anyway, guys, you guys should really check out his channel. He does a lot of, well, I think you do mostly Doctor Who. Mostly, yeah. He does dabble in other things, but it's really good. It's really well informed, and I really think you should give it a try. Alex, thank you so much. All right, guys, have a good one.